Well, the threat from Iran goes far beyond its support of terrorism. The world is focused on the war against Hamas in Gaza, and Tehran is using the distraction as a cover to develop its nuclear weapons program. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has that story.
As Israel fights Hamas in the south and prepares for a potentially greater conflict with Hezbollah in the north, Iran remains a major player behind the chaos. That could be due to the regime trying to distract the world from what's happening with the country's nuclear program.
Whether it is a formal strategy or it's just happening that way, it's absolutely a danger. Iran threw out the nuclear inspectors, 8 most important ones, in September 2023. They tripled the speed of enriching uranium for most of the last few months. Between 60% and 20% enriched uranium.
Experts believe the regime has enough uranium to make up to 8 nuclear weapons.
They could enrich to 90% weaponized uranium in like a week or two. Israel, the United States, the world is very distracted by Hamas, Hezbollah, and the rest of the world by Ukraine. So could Iran try to break out now? Yeah.
Iran claims it successfully launched 3 satellites earlier this year. Bob sees this as especially significant in terms of weapons delivery systems.
The technology they use for launching satellites can also be used potentially for nuclear weapons, in particular ICBMs, which can go a lot further. As far as we know, they're not there yet, but we have to keep a very strong eye on that too.
Rafael Grossi, chief of the International Atomic Energy Agency, recently reported that Iran continues to prevent access to inspectors and video recorded by cameras at key nuclear sites.
We must move forward in the clarification of the many aspects that require this from Iran. All countries that have signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty are not supposed to have nuclear weapons in any form. This is forbidden in international law.
Bob says Iran is effectively blinding the world to the country's nuclear progress.
It's a very dangerous situation, and it's problematic. The IAEA Board of Governors, has basically decided to do nothing about it, certainly not referring it to the UN Security Council.
Bob maintains sanctions from the original 2015 nuclear deal could be reintroduced through a snapback arrangement, but this provision has a time limit.
If the United States and the 3 key European countries want to snap back, they can snap it back, and the entire UN Security Council would need to enforce it. When you get to October 2025, January 2026, so many of the limits on Iran fall apart that Israel, and I hope the United States, will need to make a decision to do something potentially militarily with Iran if it does not radically reduce where its nuclear program is today.
Retired General Amir Avivi, head of the Israel Defense Security Forum, sees Iran's nuclear threat in a global context.
If Israel has to go to all full-scale war with Lebanon, this is our chance also to hit Iran and all the nuclear sites. So really, if the U.S. wants to avoid a regional and maybe global war, it needs to show leadership and really deter Iran and Hezbollah. This is the only way to stabilize the Middle East.
Avivi also uses more of a moral perspective to describe Israel's war with Iran's proxies.
It's a war between darkness and light, between evil and good. We're fighting the whole Western society's war against extremism, against people who really want to destroy our way of living.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
It's like there's this elaborate plan to keep us all distracted from the main thing. And the main thing is if Iran gets nuclear weapons, that completely changes the balance of power in the Middle East. It is an endgame for Israel because now Tel Aviv will be under threat of nuclear attack. And would they actually launch that? I think the answer, based on their rhetoric over the past 40 years, is yes, they would. They consider Israel to be the little Satan, and guess who's the great Satan? Well, you and I. And if that satellite launching technology turns into ICBMs, what's the next target for them? So why are we negotiating? Why is this allowed to happen? Why did the administration send them $10 billion? What kind of message was that? They're sponsoring Houthis, they're sponsoring Hezbollah, they're sponsoring Hamas, and it seems to be all some kind of grand game to keep the world distracted. It has upended the Abraham Accords. I mean, it's definitely put them on pause. And was Israel close to having peace with all of its neighbors? Well, for the Iranians, that was unacceptable. And so how do they proxy war to a distraction point and sort of hide what they're really trying to do? Again, a nuclear-armed Iran is unacceptable because it puts everything, the entire world, at risk. And please let us wake up to it. To add to the distraction, we're in an election year. We seem to be incredibly divided. The Democrats and the Republicans can't even talk to each other. They can't even come to any kind of compromise on legislation. So how can we come to compromise and say, well, it's in our national interest to stop this? Can we have a unified voice speaking to the world that people will actually believe? Are we so distracted with our internal problems that we can't pay attention to the world stage? For Christians, now more than ever, let us pray and let's believe that there is this righteous judge, because he is a righteous judge, and can he intervene on our behalf?